So pretty much the main reason we're using a microphone is because we have some people joining us online. They couldn't make it today. And then also we just wanted to have a resource that we can share with families moving forward. So welcome to those of you online, and thank you guys for being here today. My name is Cody, if you don't know me, and kind of a crazy story of how this happened was I was talking with Andy Reeder, our deacon of chairs, and we're just talking about some problems that our youth face today with technology and being maybe cyberbullied, or just different ways that parents can support their children as they are going through life in the realm of technology. And then I went to the Green Valley District Steering Committee in March of last year, and I met Melissa. And she was super passionate about making sure that the students that we have around us know how to handle technology safely. And so like these two different worlds that I was in kind of collided, and I said, this sounds like something that I feel like parents all around the community and really all around our nation could use. So with that, I'm going to welcome Melissa Winston. She is owner and therapist at 510 Counseling Group. And I don't know how much she's going to brag on herself, but she was just, what's the official award through the chamber?
Well, it's a nomination.
A nomination, okay. I'll let you talk about it.
Oh, okay.
Because I'm going to mess it up.
Cheater for telling that. We've been in business for a year. We just opened in Green Valley about a year ago in January, and we were nominated for Business of the Year, and I was nominated for Business Leader of the Year in Green Valley. So that was kind of a fun, sweet honor. You know, when you open a business in the middle of a pandemic, you're like, I just hope we stay open. So that was fun. Good morning. It's good to meet you all. A little bit about me. Again, my name is Melissa Winston. I'm a marriage and family therapist. I'm also a Christian, for sure. That's first. My journey, and part of what brought me here today, I also have two teenagers, so we're in the thick of this as well. We have one of their very favorite teachers ever sitting here, so that's fun. No, for real, they still talk about you. That's the truth. Kind of my journey, I started out my career in youth ministry. I was a youth pastor and did that for a number of years, and then I was recruited to come and run a Boys and Girls Club adolescent program. And that was kind of a really interesting situation because obviously this was not a church situation at all. We had kids who were extremely high risk, lots and lots of brokenness, and then shortly thereafter, several years later, I was recruited to go run a sex ed program. So I ran a sex ed program in 36 school districts, and we saw upwards of 30,000 teenagers a year. And so it became, and I had a team of like 40 people who did this, and we would just go into a health room in a high school and just take over. 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 12th grade, whatever, and just take over for 10 days at a time. Sometimes we were doing great big huge events with 5,000 kids or 1,000 kids, and sometimes it was a small classroom. And so I started having gobs and gobs of conversations with teenagers, of course, did that in youth ministry all the way through, but being in the public schools every day and talking about really sensitive information, people come and talk to you, right? And actually we opened a text line, and I ran that text line, and I got thousands of questions from teenagers, things they were asking where they could be confidential and nobody knew who they were. Our kids are struggling, right? And this was years ago, and it's not gotten better from there for sure. So in that whole journey, I decided I really wanted to go back to school and get more training because I was just running into these extremely tough things, and I just wanted to be more equipped. So I went back to school to be a marriage and family therapist, never once dreaming that I would actually do like clinical therapy. I thought I'd always be in ministry and nonprofit settings and continue to do that work, but God's funny like that, right? And so I wound up in residential treatment. If you've ever heard of residential treatment, it's the highest level of care in mental health. These are kids who've been hospitalized, who have been to therapy for some length of time. They've had all sorts of intervention and nothing has worked, and they cannot safely be at home. And so they get sent to these treatment centers for sometimes 9, 20 months, long time, okay, and they live there. And you're working with the family and the kids the whole time. And so that's what I did for 5 of the 10 years that I've been a therapist. I've been in the adolescent residential field for about 22 years now. And it's been really crazy, the whole journey. And now having my own teenagers, this is a battle that's happening in our household. This has been happening. I mean, remember when the iPhone came out in 2009, right? And all of us were oblivious to what that would mean 10, 15 years later. And I remember the first time one of my boys was watching YouTube Kids, and I looked over their shoulder, and there was pornographic Sonic the Hedgehog on the screen. And I was like, holy crap, like, this is a big deal, you know what I mean? And they didn't look for it. It just was the next thing to play when they were actually watching Sonic the Hedgehog. And so this is a battle that's really real for all of us. It's something I'm extremely passionate about because it's something certainly we have to address very aggressively in our home, and it's something that I deal with every day at the highest level with kids and their families. So I want to start with a little questionnaire, okay? So this is confidential. I want you to keep tabs of your answers, okay? How many of these apply to you in your home? I don't know how many of you have teenagers or have kids that you're addressing this, but I just want you to just keep little tabs in your paper or your head or your fingers or whatever, okay? So I have 24 questions. I promise, stay with me. Number 1, your child has a cell phone. Yes or no? Give yourself a point if your child has a cell phone. Your child has a gaming system, i.e. PlayStation, Xbox, etc. Your child has a tablet. Your child has a laptop, whether that be from home or school. Your child has access to these items in private spaces, such as his or her bedroom. Your child has access to social media platforms, such as Instagram, Snapchat, YouTube, or TikTok on his or her devices. If you struggle to find ways to monitor, filter, or limit your child's technology use, your child spends more time on his or her devices than you feel good about. Your child is less engaged in real-life activities, i.e. off of screens, than you were as a kid. Give yourself a point. Your child engages with friends online or via a device more than in real life. You feel that your child has less grit or perseverance than is developmentally appropriate. Your child has difficulty with sustaining attention on tasks that are not interesting to him or her. You have difficulty getting your child to contribute to your household, i.e. chores, conversation, etc., in a way that feels balanced and appropriate. You feel that your child has difficulty with relationships and or his or her relationships are shallow or detached. Your child does not have healthy wake-sleep patterns. Your child has a tough time being bored and is constantly seeking stimulation. Your child has difficulty with age-appropriate tasks such as getting him or herself up for school, self-care, hygiene, keeping track of his or her things, and organizing life and schedules. Your child is struggling in school and seems disinterested in doing anything to fix it. Your child struggles with anxiety and or depression in a way that is pretty life-controlling. Your child is disinterested in things that you were chomping at the bit to do as a teenager, things like driving, hobbies, getting out of the house with friends, but your kid might rather stay home and be online. Your child is unwilling to go toward conversations about his or her future, career, etc. It's too scary for them to talk about. You feel concerned about your child's future ability to manage him or herself as an adult. Okay, now, I don't know how we'll do in this room. We have a small crowd, but I'm wondering how many of you have 10 or more, if you kept track? How many of you have 10 or more that you're dealing with this with your kids? Okay. How about 15 or more, 20 or more? Anybody? Okay. So what I will tell you is that in my office, and I deal, my focus, my specialization is with teenagers and their families, so that's what I do. We started 510 with the whole goal of keeping kids and families out of the context of residential treatment because it's traumatic, it's difficult, and nobody ever wants to be there. It's expensive. It's upwards of $13,000 a month for your kid to attend, and people pay it. They get mortgages on their house. They get loans you wouldn't believe. I'm paying it off for a lifetime because they're so desperate. And many parents feel really alone with these issues that I talked about. And I know I'm kind of talking in worst case scenarios, but I'm doing so because I want us to really be very cognizant of where this goes, okay? It's because it's a big deal. I would consider that technology addiction is the epidemic of our generation. Epidemic. It's more dangerous than COVID in many ways as far as its life-controlling nature. You think about it, these are digital native kids. They don't know anything. I haven't been clicking. They don't know anything, we already did the survey, about life before technology. Right? They never have experienced anything before technology, so they don't understand any of the problems. And most of us who were there for the birth of technology had no idea where this was going to go, right? When I got my first iPhone in 2009, I would go through the grocery store and be like, here, watch Cars, so I don't have to listen to you whine while I go through the grocery store. Never once considered where this would go developmentally for our kids, right? And a lot of the people that I have seen are feeling extremely powerless to do anything about it in their own homes. This is legit. In the last month, okay, these are in the last month in my practice in Grain Valley, half a mile up the street. These are things that I've seen. Numerous students who are facing extreme anxiety and depression because all of their time outside of school is spent on devices, scrolling. They're in the rooms alone, scrolling. And they're extremely anxious and depressed. I have a former straight-A student who's nearly flunked out of school because of time on devices controlling their attention. I have more than one of those who are literally flunking out of school, and their parents will not put boundaries on their technology. I have a student so sleep-deprived because they cannot turn off their devices that they're hallucinating, literally hallucinating, and constantly falling asleep during the day. I had a student attempt suicide because a page created on Instagram to mock them, tagging them in pictures and mocking them. This is happening at Grain Valley. There's been multiple kids at Grain Valley who've had pages made on Instagram about them and said horrible, awful things here in Grain Valley. Only one has attempted suicide that I'm aware of. I had just last week a student who beat up their parent. Police had to be called, and that student had to be hospitalized because their phone was turned off for the day. Not to mention all of the inappropriate photos and videos being sent back and forth between teens. This is not sometimes, this is a challenge for most kids. Most kids. What's sad about it is that not only is it sad that they're opening up their hearts and lives and bodies in that way and being exploited really, but it's also a felony, and it's the focus crime of Missouri. And I watched a group of 16 kids in Joplin just a few years ago be arrested all at once for sharing videos of themselves on their Google Drive at school. This is not small, and it's not somewhere else, okay? And so it's really important to understand the gravity of what's happening. These are consistent, good kids who are getting sucked into this that without any intention of being there, right? Again, watching Sonic the Hedgehog innocently and who knows what comes up, right? Or sitting there on their phone and something gets sent to them that they didn't ask for, right? And then they get pulled in because it's really tough not to, okay? So there's a lot that I want to talk about, not just to get scary or any of those things, but I want us to really understand how this affects us, how it affects kids developmentally, all right? So I have a little video. It's like 8 minutes long, but so the man that you're going to hear from, his name is Tristan Harris. He is one of the founding members of the Google team. He created, what did he design? I'm trying to remember. He created the part of Google Gmail. I can't remember which pieces he designed, but he was a Gmail creator. And there's several other things that have been published, and we'll talk about more in a minute. But he actually now has left the industry with the hope of creating really healthy technology boundaries for our kids and creating just awareness and laws that protect our kids. So I'm gonna have you guys watch this short little video just because I think it's so informative, just about how technology works differently than other things, and then we'll come back, okay? You wanna turn that?
Well, there's a really common misconception that technology is neutral, and it's up to us to just choose how to use it. And so we're sitting there and we're scrolling and we find ourselves in this kind of wormhole, and then we say, oh man, like I should really have more self-control. And that's partially true, but what we forget when we talk about it that way is that there's 1,000 engineers on the other side of the screen whose job it was to get my finger to do that the next time. And there's this whole playbook of techniques that they use to get us to keep using the software more. So was design always this manipulative? It wasn't always this way. In fact, back in the 1970s and the early 80s at Xerox PARC, when Steve Jobs first went over and saw the graphical user interface, the way people talked about computers and what computers were supposed to be was a bicycle for our minds. That here we are, you take a human being, and they have a certain set of capacities and capabilities. And then you give them a bicycle, and they can go to all these new distances. They're empowered to go to these brand new places and to do these new things, to have these new capacities. And that's always been the philosophy of people who make technologies. How do we create bicycles for our minds to do and empower us to feel and access more? Now, when the first iPhone was introduced, it was also the philosophy of the technology. How do we empower people to do something more? And in those days, it wasn't manipulative because there was no competition for attention. Photoshop wasn't trying to maximize how much attention it took from you. It didn't measure its success that way. And the internet overall had been, in the very beginning, not designed to maximize attention. It was just putting things out there, creating these message boards. It wasn't designed with this whole persuasive psychology that emerged later. What happened is that the attention economy and this race for attention got more and more competitive. And the more competitive it got to get people's attention on, say, a news website, the more they need to add these design principles, these more manipulative design tactics, as ways of holding on to your attention. And so YouTube goes from being a more neutral, honest tool of just here's a video to, oh, do you want to see these other videos? And oh, do you want to autoplay the next video? And oh, do you want to, here's some notifications. These products start to look and feel more like media that's about maximizing consumption and less like bicycles for our minds. And I think that's such a subtle and important thing to recognize, is that more and more of technology is really not on our team to help us spend our time the way we want to. It's more on the team of maximizing how much time we spend on the screen. Right now, the only way to succeed in the App Store is by proving you're really good at getting people's attention. And so by making attention the currency of success, it forces all of these good-hearted, good-intentioned people who make apps or make media sites to do things that they don't want to do just because they have to get attention. You have meditation apps that have to send you all these notifications and add streaks and do all this gamey stuff just to get you to use it the most, as opposed to having the phone itself recognize that there's parts of your life where meditation might want to be at the top of the list for you because you're defining that. And so that meditation app could win for the right reasons and not for the wrong reasons. So we always worry about new technologies when they first appear. When people started bringing out the newspapers on the subway, people worried, oh my God, people are going to stop talking to each other on the subway. And then TV showed up and people worried, oh my God, people are going to spend all this time at home. And the radio, we always worry. And then somehow it seems to turn out okay. Or we worry when back in the 1970s, people were at home on the telephone and calling each other all the time. We thought, oh, the kids these days, what are they doing to their minds, right? So now it's tempting to say, well, now the kids these days, they're on Snapchat. And therefore, we survived all those other technology transitions. Nothing really bad happened. So maybe it's all okay. This is just kids being kids in a new way. And I want to talk about why that's not true, and why this is different. What's different is that, let's take that telephone example. In the 1970s, if someone picked up a telephone to go call their friend and they spent time gossiping on the telephone, we could do that, that's fine. But the telephone wasn't updated every day with new manipulative design principles to be better and better at seducing you into calling your friends. So what's different with Snapchat is that there was 1,000 engineers every single day who work on the product to actually find new ways, not just to get you to use it, but to kind of tag you both on the shoulder and try to get you into a reciprocity relationship where you owe someone else a response. In fact, they have a feature in Snapchat called Snap Streaks. And Snap Streaks count the number of days in a row you've sent a message back and forth with someone. So if I have a best friend and we've been chatting every day for 100 days, I see a little fireball and the number 100 next to it. And what that does is they've just created something now I don't want to lose. Because I have a streak going. I've got 100 days, and now if I don't send them a message tomorrow, I'm going to lose the whole thing. And when you're a kid, actually, this has a really big impact on you. I'm not making this up. There's a woman named Emily Weinstein at Harvard who studied the effects of Snapchat and Snap streaks on kids by accident. It emerged in her interviews. And she found out that kids, when they go on vacation, they have to give their password to up to 5 other friends to actually have them send messages while they're gone on vacation because they're so worried about losing their Snap streaks. In fact, a lot of kids, they wake up and they see these 30 contacts with different streaks, and they have to just take pictures of floors and ceilings just to kind of get through all these Snap streaks so they don't lose any of them. So we have to ask, when Snapchat is designing a feature like Snap streaks, are they doing that because they most want to help kids, empower them to live their lives? Or are they doing that because it's really good at getting their attention? And when we're parents and we see kids using it this way, we have to recognize there's something very different going on here. This was not true in the 1970s when we had a neutral telephone that we would choose to use when we wanted to use it. There are now 1,000 people behind our new telephone, which is, say, Snapchat, that's being designed and updated every day to be more compelling at addicting and holding on to people's attention. And it's not good for us. I mean, I think we can all feel it. We become more and more on the treadmill to the number of likes or feedback we get, basically, from social media, and start tying our own approval, our own self-worth to how much attention we get from other people. I mean, even for me, I notice that, if I post something, it does affect me whether or not I have a lot of likes or few likes. And it's hard to really, if you think about it, and get to the felt sense of my self-worth is completely independent of that. That's a subtle thing to hold. And developmentally, children are more vulnerable to their self-worth being externalized like this. And the problem is that, there's always been as well ways of externalizing our self-worth in terms of how much money we have in our bank account or in terms of how many friends we have. But now the externalization of our self-worth is controlled by a handful of companies whose goals are different than our goals. They're not evil companies. They just have the different goal of maximizing attention. And our goals are not that. But the problem is that their goals become our goals. This is what's actually so dangerous, is that their goals of engaging us the most by having us care about likes become our goals. We actually wake up in the morning as sovereign human beings and we start caring about the number of likes we got as if that's our goal in life. That becomes our goal. And it's as if we've been infected. It's if they've drilled a hole in the back of our head and now they've injected the virus and now we walk around searching for feedback using social media. And they won if that happens. And again, it's not because they're evil, but they're in a different game. They're trying to maximize attention. But we have to ask a much deeper question, which is, what do we want in our lives, and what is our self-worth actually tied to? And maybe it's being virtuous, or being a good friend, or being, caring about what matters, or living by our values. There's a whole bunch of things that we could define for ourselves, and I think the less people have defined their own values, the more vulnerable they are to someone else coming in and giving them their values. And to fix that, we're going to need to talk about different kinds of metrics, different ways of measuring.
Thank you, Cody. So there's a whole body of evidence around the impact of technology on teens, and it's really important to understand for all of us, we have to come back to what are our family's values, right? That picture right there is actually, it's the Winston family creed, and it lists our values, and it's posted in our home, and it's something we've all signed. And it's something we come back to regularly in order to really discuss the importance of who we want to be. And we're not perfect at it. My kids aren't perfect. There's none of us in our home who are perfect, obviously. But we're constantly coming back to that conversation and really working to define our values. Excuse me, allergy season is my friend right now. But we have to decide, how do we allow technology and devices in our homes to reflect our values to our kids, right? Rather than the opposite, which is what I'm seeing most of the time in my office. I have very few families who come into my office, and these are good families. These are people you probably know who come into my office who are trying really hard but feel really powerless around this conversation, okay? We have kids with unfettered access to the entire world in their hands. We are setting them up for failure. We are setting them up for failure. I will spare you the stories of things that I have seen surrounding pornography and sexting and inappropriate information happening, going to our kids' devices, what happens on FaceTime, the messes I have had to walk through with people cleaning these things up legally and with their friends, the kids I have hospitalized because something they sent to someone got sent to other people and they tried to hurt themselves because of it. Like, I will spare you all those details, but what I will tell you is that we have got to be concerned. And we also not just all of the like inappropriate information that's out there, but the way that it affects our kids' brains. And this is so important. So I want to talk just a little bit about brain development. So the brain is not fully developed till the age of 25. Most of us know that, right? The frontal lobe is a really important part of the brain that helps us like make good decisions and really long-term thinking, lots of different functions of the frontal lobe, not fully developed till about the age of 25, okay? And lost my spot. It's much more challenging to untangle the problems when these things start when they're younger, okay? Having access to technology, a lot of technology, the younger they are, is a little bit like putting a virus, like if you have a fully written program and there's a virus brought in, a lot of times, Andy could talk more about this, a lot of times you can clean that up, okay? But if there's a virus installed in the making of the program, it's really, really difficult to undo. And that's a lot of what's happening to our kids, is that the impact of what's going on in the brain is happening while the brain is still developing. And so it becomes hardwired into their brains and how they operate, okay? Research is showing us that extensive technology use is producing ADHD-like symptoms, impaired emotional and social intelligence, addiction, social isolation, disrupted sleep, and ultimately impaired brain development, okay? Essentially, if we could just really simplify this, the brain is a muscle, okay? If we're simplifying it as much as possible, the brain is a muscle. How do muscles work? Like any muscle, the parts that you exercise get stronger. The parts that you don't exercise don't get stronger, right? And what we're finding is that technology is pretty much all left brain activity. All left brain activity, okay? There's very little right brain engagement in technology whatsoever. So the left brain is kind of what we call the go part of the brain, right? It's your intellectual brain, it's your information brain. So it makes sense why technology would be left brain. Even the visual perception of the screen and the type of light on a screen is left brain input. Okay, and so what we're finding is that kids are literally we do this. I'm partnered with a program that does this work. That if you measure the developmental capacity of a left brain versus a right brain in a typical kid, there's a 4 to 6 year age gap. 4 to 6 years. I had a kiddo in residential treatment who had a 4-year-old right brain. He was 13. 4-year-old right brain and a 23-year-old left brain. So what happens is you have left brain really strong and fast, right? Because it's the go part of the brain. The right brain is the slow down, think about it, process it, feel the things, make good decisions, all of that part of the brain. So you have all this left brain information going super fast, and the right brain cannot take it in. It's like trying to ask a 3 or 4-year-old to process adult material and make good decisions in the moment. They can't do it. Right? They can't do it. And so developmentally, what we're seeing is these kids are extremely dysregulated. You see all sorts of crazy behavior, violence. I mean, you wouldn't believe the stuff that I've seen, okay? And so what's happening in the brain is so, so important for us because it's not even just the strength of the left versus the right brain. It's also the connectivity. Okay, the connections between the left and right brain are really important. Anytime two parts of the brain fire at the same time, they wire together with a neural pathway, okay? And that's what happens if you get two parts of the brain to run at the same time, they wire together. And so when we have all left brain activity happening and the right brain is disengaged, we have connections that are not happening the way that they should. And so the integration is important, and also the balance of the brain is really important. And then also the communication between the brain and the body is really important. And we have kids who are very disconnected, kids who literally can't feel their bodies, who have no sense of themselves in space, who can't feel their emotions, but they're acting out because they have emotions, just they can't feel them, right? And so this is a real big deal. And this is common. This isn't just a few kids. This is a lot of kids that this is happening to, okay? And then you start to have things like anxiety, depression. You have gut dysregulation because we have connectivity issues between the brain and the body. Gut dysregulation causes inflammation in the body, which will cause anxiety and depression. So all this is so connected. Technology is such an important piece. Kids with issues with executive functioning, with lack of, because they don't have physical activity, they're not as active, they're sitting and doing things at home. So all this is so much, so I could talk all day. But the key here is that we as parents have got to go back to our values, right? We have got to come back to our values and talk about where does technology fit in the big picture, okay? Because just like Tristan said, technology is not evil in and of itself. I'm a big techie, huge. We own every Apple device that exists, like literally, and we use all of them regularly. So technology is not innately evil by any means. It's all about how we use it, right? And we also have to remember part of what Tristan said that's so important is that it's not passive anymore. Technology is not passive anymore. Your phone is literally constantly seeking your attention on purpose because they get paid more every time you click on stuff, right? Every time you click on something, the more minutes that you watch something, the more money they make. So that's why it matters to them, okay? So their like economic pursuit is literally what's driving our lives and our brain development in our kids, okay? So that's really important to understand. So we as parents, we have to come back to center. We have to look at what are our family's values again. We have to set age-appropriate boundaries and that help them succeed. They have to have balance in how much time is on a screen versus how much time they're spending doing other activities, how much they're moving. The most important thing for right brain development, do you know what it is? Movement. Movement. Most important thing for right brain development, moving. That's why kids need to play and explore. Little ones play and explore and touch things and put it in their mouth and feel it and, you know, fall down and all the things that little kids do. That's so important, and our teens need those things too. So being engaged relationally, all of that is so critical for right brain development. We have to set clear and defined boundaries. And often what I find is people are like, well, we just try not to do too much. I'm like, well, what's too much? What's too much? You need to know what's too much for your kiddo, okay? And we need to set very clear and defined boundaries. If you want to, you can use this if it's helpful to you. If you can use your phone and kind of squeeze up there, there's a little QR code, and this will take you to a page where there's a whole bunch of different contracts that you can use for your kids for different devices. You can edit them, make them your own. It's just a template to give you a starting place, but make very clear what those expectations are around your kids' technology, okay? Teach them why this matters. My kids are so tired of hearing it, I can't talk about it. So if you have never watched the Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma, Tristan Harris was the founder of this documentary. In this documentary, if you get time to watch it, it's about an hour and a half. You have the man who monetized Facebook. You have the people who made the like button, right? You have people who developed all of this technology are in this conversation talking about its potential damaging impact, okay? It's so good. Have your kids watch it. They need to understand what's going on. We need to have very honest conversations. And here's the thing. Where do we draw the line, okay? Just like anything, we have to do this developmentally, right? Progressively. Like, as a kid, little kids, we don't think about the graduated driving laws. Why does that exist? because they're not ready to just jump in a car and go, right? They need supervision, they need support, they need someone to show them how to do it before they're allowed to do it on their own. And then even when they're allowed to do it on their own, they need to have limits and boundaries and expectations. And then we slowly give them full access, right? So you see this little thing there, the responsibility, freedom. As responsibility increases, so then does freedom, okay? So that means you do things like, let's say if you were to start, you get your first phone, kid gets their first phone, and maybe you give them access to talk, text, and FaceTime, and that's it. And maybe they have 2 hours of time allowed on that phone in a day in your screen time device. If that's where you start, at age 13, 8th grade, all the research says kids should not get phones before 8th grade. Absolutely should not get phones before 8th grade. Social media, I suggest waiting till 16. Now, I don't know if people are doing it, but my kids don't have it yet, and I don't feel bad. They're 15 and 16. They're not ready, okay? And so setting those limits and see how they do with it, right? We have to inspect what we expect. If we hand them a phone, we tell them what we expect. We have to check in and see how they're doing with it. I have parents and families who are in this constant battle about, if my kid won't turn it off, I can't get it away from them, and they're constantly on it, and they have no boundaries. No. There needs to be screen time on your kid's phone. Andy's going to tell you all sorts of ways to help you manage that, but it's really important that there are very clear and expected boundaries and that you inspect it just like you would anything else as you're raising your children, right? There's nothing that we're like, here, have everything in the world that's accessible to you. On TV, we don't say, sure, you can sit and have unfettered access to HBO. Like, no, are you kidding? Like, absolutely not. Not even really like Disney Plus for your little kids. We have boundaries because we don't want them to have access to everything. And that's got to be true with our teenagers as well. Give them a little more at a time. If they have social media, that's something you need to be looking at, talking about, okay? Very consistent conversation. Hold off, and in fact, my husband offered my oldest son, because he started asking, like, hey, would it be okay if I got such and such social media? He's 16, he does very well with technology at this stage. He had struggled before, but he's doing very well now, and which you would expect, right? They're gonna fail. That's part of the learning process. They're gonna fail. And he started asking questions, and my husband was like, you know what? I will give you $500 when you graduate from high school, if you will just wait till you graduate from high school, let's get Snapchat. And Malachi was like, done. There you go. You know what I mean? So just because there's so many pitfalls, right? So, but the next piece, okay, is we're allowing freedom as responsibility increases and they demonstrate clear responsibility in an area to handle themselves, then we give a little bit more freedom and they see how they do. Give a little bit more freedom, see how they do, right? Because we need to see that they have internal regulation to be able to turn it off themselves. And as Tristan said, that's not easy because the world is trying to suck them in because they want to make money off of their time, right? And so we have to help them find boundaries and manage. I have adults who say, man, I'm going to set screen time for myself because I can't turn it off, right? This is a challenge for all of us. Think about the developing brain. It's that much harder, okay? It's that much harder. So the last thing I really want to challenge all of us on, and this is where I see it go awry for a lot of families, is that we have to prioritize the relationship. Yes, we need to have boundaries, 1,000%, but how we enforce those boundaries matters, okay? We have to do so relationally. Truth in love, right? Okay, that's really, really important. We have to steward their hearts. We have to be infusing truth in their lives. We need to be willing to go towards tough conversations with them safely. And this is where I see parents really blow it because you see your kid who's done something really stupid and it is the scariest thing ever, right? You're like, oh my gosh, my kid is going to hell in a handbasket. Like we are scared to death. And then we freak out. And then what happens to our kid? What do they learn in those moments when we freak out? That's right. It's not safe to talk to mom or dad about this conversation, right? So us managing our own emotional material, I can't tell you what happened inside of me that first time I saw stuff on a screen with Sonic the Hedgehog. I was mortified. I felt like I was the worst mom of all humanity. This was YouTube Kids that's supposed to be filtered, okay? And everything in me wanted to take that thing and break it in half in front of him and say, we will never have another piece of technology in our home again, ever, 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 you know? But I didn't, you know? So we have to really work to manage ourselves and to manage our emotional material and respond safely when they fail, not if. When they fail, because they're going to. That's part of the learning process. This is really critical. We have to spend time connecting, sit down for dinner, take them out on dates, do fun things with them so that they know you love them, okay? Don't allow your kids to be overscheduled. Too much stress drives them to escape, right? What do you do when you're stressed out? Escape, shut down, turn off your brain, right? They do the same thing. If they're too overscheduled and they're too stressed, and I see this a lot, then they're going to go towards those escapes, okay? And then have realistic expectations. Again, your kid will fail. We have to be safe for that when they do. Remember that failing and falling into these traps, this is important, and this is how we steward our kids' hearts. When our kids fail and they fall into these traps, we have to look at what is beneath that. What is the longing? The girl who's constantly putting pictures of herself on Instagram that are not super appropriate, what is the longing? She wants to be seen. She wants to be loved. She wants to be told she's beautiful. Dads, are we telling our girls that enough? Right? What is happening when the boy who's constantly on PS4 talking to his friends or is on Snapchat doing snap streaks, all those things, what is it he wants to be connected? Right? He wants to be seen. He wants to be cool. So we have to make sure that we're creating space for that to happen for them. We have to go towards their hearts. In moments when your kids fail, go towards your hearts. What's happening here? What is it you long for? And how do we help you get that in a healthy way? Right? Remember, God fulfills the deepest longings of our soul. PS4 does not. Right? And we have to help train them towards those things, and that's really, really important. And then last thing I'll say, because I know we're a little bit over time on my part, is get help when you need to, okay? If you are stuck and you are struggling, get help when you need to. There are people who do this for a living, and I know our team, and there are lots of other great therapy resources and pastors and people who love you, who want to walk this out with you and your family. Ask for help. Everybody's struggling. I don't know very many families at all who aren't like, oh my gosh, I feel like this is a battleground with our teens. And so you're in good company. Let's talk about it, okay? Let's work this through. I do this for a living. I get paid to help people do this, and I still have to go home and be in the battleground with my kids too. It's part of the deal. It's the world we live in, okay? And so do that. And the last thing I really want to challenge you on, and probably the most important, is pray for your kids. Pray for your kids. Listen to those gut checks. When the Holy Spirit tells you, I can't tell you how many times through the journey that we've had, is when the Holy Spirit has given me this check, like, you need to just look at their phone. You just need to look at the phone today. And then it was like, God, I did, right? Listen to those things. Pay attention to them. Listen to those promptings when you are stepping towards hard conversations. When you see something that you're like, oh, we need to talk about this, but I'm scared to do it, right? Have the awkward, hard conversation. When you fail or when you get angry or when you have bad moments, apologize, own it, model that repentance to them so it's safe for them too, okay? This is a journey. I constantly pray, like, Lord, give me your eyes, because I want to see what you see, and I want to love them like you love them, and I know for real I cannot do this on my own, right? You're going to have to fill in the places that can't do this, and that's a prayer all of us as parents have to pray. So I'm going to pass this over. I think Andy's going to come up and tell us how do we do it, because he's the techie guy.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Melissa. So many of the things that she was talking about as teachers, there's a lot of teachers in here, and obviously parents of teenagers, we see it all the time. I had a student at the end of first block, which for us is around 9 a.m., and he was on his phone. I'd seen him a couple times on his phone, and I was like, hey, how much screen time have you used today? And it was 9 a.m., and he opened it, and he said, 2 hours and 30 minutes. I said, what time did you wake up? And he goes, 7:30. So had almost been on his phone the entire time. I'm like, how does that even make sense? Like, I've seen you not on it. He said, well, I have to have it open for Spotify to not play ads. So he was listening to music as he was working, and literally his phone was just open the whole time. And like that's from the moment he wakes up, his phone is open. Finley, our 4-year-old, told Kelsey and I that she's ready for her own phone now. Because we always tell her, no, you can't access these things on our phone. And she's like, well, I'm ready for my own phone then. So the battle starts young, and the fact that we're here able to discuss this today and hear from Melissa's expertise on this just means that we are fighting a good fight, and it takes a village to do that. So we're going to take about a 10-minute break. We'll get Andy set up after that, and he's going to tell us some things about content filters and just how to keep our families safe on that. So one more round of applause for Melissa. Thank you so much. And she will be hanging out with us. So